Educators like me have always been told to do the impossible. Too often, our love for the job and love for our students is exploited. But by 1946 in St. Paul, Minnesota, the district pushed teachers too far, and they pulled off what their bosses thought would never be possible. Teachers walked out on strike for themselves and their students in the country's first ever illegal, organized educators' strike. It is all too common for educators today to work in underfunded public schools, forced to do more with less and for less. St. Paul in the early 20th century was no different. And since 1919 in St. Paul, city law severely limited public spending on education, which meant school budgets were painfully low, leaving countless school buildings in disrepair and teachers getting by on poverty wages. The workforce was mostly young women who the city's politicians thought they could underpay and disregard. Sound familiar? It was not uncommon to see over 50 students packed into the same elementary classroom, and at least 55% of elementary school buildings were falling apart. Some schools only had a single bathroom for 180 students to share, and no money for paper towels, toilet paper, or soap. Before 1947, the district didn't even buy textbooks for students. If it was bad before, it was only getting worse. But then, teachers began to organize. First, they tried appealing to the public, campaigning for public education reforms through a referendum. But the elite and wealthy in the city conspired to wage war against these sensible reforms. Pouring cash into their opposition campaign, real estate companies and businesses bought $600 full-page ads in newspapers almost daily, demonizing teachers as selfish, greedy, and a drain on public money. The real reason they opposed the budget reforms? If the reforms passed, their property taxes would increase. And they called the teachers greedy? The reforms were defeated as a result of the manipulative campaign run by the city's elite. But their deceptive campaign was the last straw for teachers. Now they knew they could only make things change if they were ready to fight. There was just one big issue. Public sector strikes were completely illegal all across the country at the time. In fact, educators in Minnesota would continue to be denied the right to strike until 25 years later in 1971. Fights like this were going to be the start of changing that. On October 29, 1946, the Joint Council of Teachers Unions sent a statement to St. Paul's teachers about how schools had been understaffed, inadequately equipped, and poorly maintained for far too long. The poverty wages and grueling working conditions made it harder to recruit new teachers or retain anyone, not unlike the recruitment and retention crisis we see across education today. At a meeting of over 900 teachers, resolutions calling for school funding increases and teacher salary increases passed immediately. A final resolution stated clearly that they would take any action necessary to achieve their demands. With the strike imminent, the superintendent desperately attempted to sow fear, threatening their tenure rights, certification, and even firing them outright. But he severely underestimated them. Unafraid, the teachers launched their strike on November 25, 1946, with women at the helm. This teachers' strike took place at the height of what is known as the Great Strike Wave of 1946, the largest strike wave in U.S. history, where over 5 million workers across many different industries went on strike. And the community, the parents, the families proudly stood with the teachers, fundraising for strike support with small donations coming by mail from all across the country. For 5 long weeks, teachers held the line without pay, resolved to win, and on December 27th, the city finally caved. After this successful strike, public school teachers felt a newfound power. United against poor working conditions, teachers took collective action, and they won. The legacy of the St. Paul teachers' strike is alive and well today. They provided a spark that would inspire a generation of educators and public sector workers broadly to fight and build the movement into a vast fire. Educator struggles have been reignited with a new intensity in recent years. Politicians and billionaires have simultaneously pushed for greater privatization of education, undercutting school budgets, and attacking all public sector unions and workers' rights. The key lesson from the St. Paul teachers' strike for today: when we get fed up of being pushed to our limits, when we unite and fight for what we deserve, when we organize, struggle, and sacrifice, we can win bigger than we ever thought possible.